I'm Andres, the Green Card Doctor, and my goal is to help 5,000 immigrants obtain legal status in the next 5 years. I also want to help as many people as possible learn and understand more about U.S. immigration. That's why I do these videos. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to share with you information that will help you on your immigration journey so that it is smoother and less stressful. In today's video, I'm going to answer some recent questions we've had. If you don't know me, let me introduce myself. I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the US as a child. I moved to Israel as a young adult and almost lost my green card. I had to work my way through the complex and stressful immigration process to achieve US citizenship. All this before I was an attorney, so I know exactly where you've been because I've been there. My goal is to make your journey less stressful than mine was, and I want your life to be transformed in a positive way after working with me and my firm. Our last subject of the day, I know I've shared my story with you many times. Often I've said that I almost lost my green card. I want to talk more about that because it's a topic that many people just don't understand. There are a variety of ways that you can get a green card. In fact, in my book, I discuss 9 of them. If you'd like a copy of the book, drop a comment below and we'll contact you to get your information to either mail you a copy of the book or email it to you. Most of my clients get their green card through a marriage or a family-based petition. When you apply for a marriage-based green card and you have been married less than 2 years, you get a conditional green card. That's good for 2 years, and then you have to apply for a permanent green card. Now, permanent green card is kind of a misnomer. It means exactly what that word should be used, because even with a permanent green card, you can still be deported. You can still lose your green card and your legal status, and you have to renew it every 10 years. Yes, your status as a green card holder is permanent, but not much else about it is. That is why I recommend you apply for your citizenship as soon as you're able to. So let me explain to you what happened with me and my family, and hopefully it'll help you understand. It'll be applicable to you in your situation. So when I was 21 years old, my family decided to move to Israel. I was born in Chile, so I had both an Israeli and a Chilean citizenship. I also had a permanent U.S. green card. I came to the U.S. in 1981, and we got our green card in 1989. What I didn't realize is that when you have a permanent green card, you've told USCIS that you plan on staying in the U.S. permanently. Now, at that point, it was INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services. Today, it's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, but same basic idea. If you leave the U.S. today for more than 180 days on one trip, USCIS is going to assume you abandoned your green card. This means your status may no longer be valid or legal. You can't just tell US, oh, I'm coming back now, please give me my green card back. If you were considered abandoned, you would have to apply to get it again. So what happened to me is I moved to Israel. Now back then, you had to be back to the US every 11 months and 29 days, basically once a year. You can't stay more than that. Now, I had been there almost a year, came here, went back to Israel, stayed there almost a year and came back, and this is the second trip, and they didn't have to let me back in, but they did. If I had stayed longer, I could have lost it. The difference is that was pre 9/11, and the world, it was a different place back then. Now, what happens if you want to travel and you're out of the US? So make sure before, for example, let's say you accept a job outside the country, and it's going to be a 2-year contract. So make sure before you travel that you're able to come back. I want to remind everyone of something very important. Anytime you leave the US and come back, you're never guaranteed re-entry unless you're a US citizen. So even if you have gotten advance parole, even if you have traveled before and come back with no issues, if you have a re-entry permit or a green card, each time you re-enter, you're going to be inspected, and each time Customs and Border Patrol decides if they will let you enter. You might have heard of advance parole. Advance parole is for people who have no permanent status. Therefore, if you have TPS or DACA, you could have applied for advance parole before traveling, this advance permission to leave the U.S. and re-enter. Advance parole is like a visa giving you permission to come back to the U.S. legally. you will still need a valid passport to enter the US when you have advanced parole. If you have a green card, you can apply for a re-entry permit. Again, going back to the example, you have a green card, you're a lawful permanent resident here in the United States, you accept a job outside US, the contract is for 2 years. So yes, you may be able to travel back and forth, but you realize most of your time is going to be in the US. So you apply for Form I-131 for advanced parole, for a re-entry permit, and you indicate why, what are you leaving, you provided the contract, where you're going to be staying, what you're going to be doing, what have you. A re-entry permit, it's like a passport. You use it as you would a passport. However, as I mentioned, Customs and Border Patrol doesn't have to allow you back in, even if you have advanced parole or a re-entry permit. Now, they likely will, but let's say, aside from the travel, you committed a crime in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. that now disqualifies you and may keep you from getting your green card. Again, it is not a guarantee that you're coming back. Now, will USCIS make it harder to get a new green card if you've abandoned one green card? Not really, but you showed the government by your actions that your intention was not to stay in the United States. Therefore, this will be a factor that they're going to consider in any subsequent application. So I'm not saying it's going to be harder, but you need to explain what happened and why the change. Now, does it take the same amount of time to process a second application if you apply for a green card again, or is it faster since you already had one? Look, it takes the same amount of time as if you're applying for the first one, because your first one was invalidated due to abandonment. There is no faster processing time because you were previously a green card holder, unless you kept your file as we always recommend, so you can gather your documents more quickly. If you are approved, you must be a green card holder for the same time required by your first process before you can apply for citizenship. So in most cases, that means before you can apply for citizen, you're going to have to be a green card holder for 5 years. 3 years if you got your green card through marriage to a U.S. citizen. So if you had your green card, you abandoned it, then you filed anew, you're still going to have to wait your 5 or 3 years. The amount of time you had your green card originally is not counted. Now, what can you do if you want to travel for longer than the time period allowed? So if you're traveling and you are a green card holder, you should know that if you leave the U.S. for more than 6 months, again, for me it was 11 months and 29 days, but nowadays it's 180 days, you can be considered to have abandoned your green card. As I mentioned, in some instances, you can obtain permission to be out of the U.S. for 1 to 2 years. But anything over that, you will need to show extraordinary circumstances that kept you from returning, that don't have to be accepted by the government, or you're going to be considered to have abandoned your green card. What about if you're stuck outside of the U.S. due to COVID? Can you apply for a re-entry permit when you are outside of the U.S.? Unfortunately, you cannot apply for a re-entry permit from outside of the U.S. That is something you have to do from here before you leave. However, if you are stuck outside due to having COVID or because your travel arrangements were canceled, you may be able to use supporting documents like doctor's notes or airline notification to prove that there were circumstances outside of your control. You may be allowed to appear in immigration court and explain what happened. So you come into Customs and Border Patrol, you get off your plane, you meet a CBP agent. That agent could let you come into the U.S., no questions asked. He or she may also decide to put you into removal proceedings so you can explain your circumstances to the judge. What about if you can't get back due to COVID and your advanced parole or reentry expires? If you're outside of the U.S. for over 1 year, your green card could be invalidated. You must prove that you always intended to return to the U.S. The circumstances beyond your patrol kept that from happening, and that you still have ties to the U.S. and you want to live here. So it might help if you are a returning resident. You can file for SB1 visa, it's a returning resident visa, at the consulate where you are. Of course, if the consulate is not open due to COVID, you have a whole other set of issues, right? You gotta wait until it opens. If the expiration date on your green card hasn't passed, you may be able to just enter the U.S., talk to CBP, and see if they let you in. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but you look, either you're coming in or you get coming in being put into removal. You may need to file Form I-193 application for a waiver of a passport or visa and pay the filing fee. And finally, you could argue your case for an immigration judge. We highly recommend, if it comes to that, you hire a qualified immigration attorney. In fact, I suggest you speak to an immigration attorney before you make that decision. Don't just wing it. Only way to succeed is through preparation. COVID is not going to give you a free pass. You can't say, I wanted to keep my green card and just get it back. You must show that your actions backed up what you're saying. Keep records to show everything you have done to get back to the United States. If you left the US in 2018, don't say you would have come back in COVID in March of 2020 without a ticket, without any documentation. They're not going to believe you. But if you left in February with the expectation of coming back in March or April and you couldn't, well, that's reasonable. So provide copies of the tickets and the return tickets that you made, proof of your lease that you still had in the US, the bank account you still had here, the job you had here, your family ties that you had in the US. Again, document all that, and COVID could very well be exceptional circumstances, but it really is fact specific. So 2 things you should know. 1, you should know that if you leave the US, even if only for a weekend trip, while your change of status or your adjustment of status application is pending, meaning you've applied for your green card but you haven't gotten it and you don't have advanced parole, if you leave, your application is going to be considered abandoned. Once your application is considered abandoned, it is denied and you will need to start the whole process over again. There are a few exceptions that you must meet to overcome this automatic abandonment. If you are a H or L visa holder and you want to travel, talk to an immigration attorney. They can help ensure you meet all the necessary criteria. You should also know that if you've been deported and your time bar or your ban is up, you can't just automatically re-enter. You're going to have to appeal your case, ask that it be reopened or ask that it be reconsidered, or someone needs to file for you. But if, let's say you were in the United States without permission, you left, you're barred for 10 years. So can you come back 10 years later? Sure, you can apply for a visa to enter back in, or you have a relative that applies for you, fantastic, you can do that. If you've been ordered removed, that order of removal stays forever unless you do something to overturn it. So file a motion to reopen, or you file for a waiver. Again, it's one of those things that you can fix, depending if you have a path to achieve legal status. If you wait until the bar is up, you will still need to apply to get a visa as a visitor or as an immigrant, as I just explained. I hope this helps you understand more about U.S. immigration. And you need to be aware that traveling outside the U.S. when you are not a U.S. citizen may impact your immigration goals and how long you can stay outside the U.S. Don't lose your green card. If you've been outside the U.S. for too long, we recommend you talk to an immigration attorney to determine the best way to get you back, if it's possible. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and set up notifications so you'll see when we post our next video. We appreciate your support. Until next time, stay healthy and be well.